So, quickly, Guardian. This is the heaviest of the plate-wearing classes. They can wear full plate. All the soldiers can actually access full plate at some point in time. Guardians get a little bit earlier. But they're the staunchest. They are completely melee oriented. There's no magic to these guys whatsoever. One thing about Guardians, however, is that they can use pole arms, which can cause insane amount of damage if used correctly. So that's one of the things. I do have a Guardian. His primary weapon is a pole arm. He really can use it to create a lot of damage. Plus, he can soak up quite a bit of damage. It's a very survivable class if you played right. Dark Templar. Now, this is kind of a cross a little bit between a dark priest and a soldier. Okay, so they typically use a mace and a shield, or a sword and a shield. That's pretty much all they have as far as weapons. They can use a crossbow, of course. They do have access to full plate in time, but they also have the ability to use magical wards to create life taps, so they can actually steal life energy from the creatures or the enemies they're fighting to keep themselves alive a little bit longer, so they can take a pretty good amount of damage. So it's kind of a mix of a warrior and possibly a necromancer. If you're familiar with the old EverQuest combinations, think more like Shadow Knight, really. Then you have the Conqueror, which again is a frontline soldier, heavy armor. But these guys really do a lot of work with dual wielding. They do a lot of dual wielding. They cannot use pole arms, but they can do a lot of dual wielding and can really up their damage output that way. They could probably, depending on the specs you use, they can do as much, if not more, damage than a Guardian even in melee. So these guys are very, very strong. Coming down to Priest. Now we'll start over here with Bear Shaman, because that's what a Sumerian can be. These are the heaviestly armored priests. They can really wade right into the middle of a battle, and wield their clubs, as well as being able to cast healing magic and a little bit in the way of natural attacks, so to speak. They can wear medium armor, which is fairly good for a priest, but they're limited in their weapons. They can use two-handed blunts, basically big clubs. They can use a bow and or a crossbow if they needed to, but if you're playing a solo character, that's going to be somewhat limited. You use your bow or your crossbow to bring a mob to you, but other than that, you're just going to be swinging a two-handed club at things. But they're very strong. They got very good survivability. Now we're going to switch over here to the Stygian so that we can look at Tempest of Set. Tempest of Set, these again are priests, so they can only use light armor or cloth armor. They can call down magic from the Tempest, from the Set god, which is normally found in Stygia. Think Set, the Egyptian god Set, with a strong snake bent for these guys. They are able to use a polearm. They can use a polearm. The only other class that can use a polearm, Guardian and Tempest of Set. They can also use shields, one-handed blunts like maces or swords, things of that nature. They're also a lot of their spells center around lightning. So if you like casting lightning bolts, these might be the guys for you. Then we're going to go over to the Accolonian culture so we can look at Priests of Mitra. Again, think of, this is maybe the closest you might find to, say, like an EverQuest or a World of Warcraft Paladin. Okay, they can wear up to light armor. They can use shields, and you can use swords or maces or daggers. They can use a crossbow. But they also have lots of good healing spells. Is probably the best healers of the priest class. Is best straight healers. But they've got some smite spells too that can cause a bit of damage. So between self-healing and using their smite and a little bit of martial ability, they're pretty good. I've got a character that's a priest of Mithras. I like playing. Coming down here to rogues, you have barbarians. Now this is barbarian. This is Conan the Barbarian. Okay, maybe not quite as muscular and heavy as Conan himself, but they can wear light armor because they don't want to go any heavier, because they really thrive in being able to move around well, dodge a lot of things. They use two-handed edged, so big swords, or two-handed blunts, as well as one-handed. They can dual wield and cause a lot of damage. They just can't take as much. They're going to receive more damage because they can't wear as heavy armor. But they will be able to hopefully avoid some because they're wearing lighter armor. That's the kind of the idea there. The assassin. These are the guys who hide in the alleyways and stab you in the back as you walk by. They're limited in their armor. They can wear cloth armor or silk armor, which is another version of cloth. They can also, as far as weapons, daggers, crossbows. That's it. Now, they can apply poisons to their daggers, and that can give a damage over time. They also, the ability to cause a high damage early on. If an enemy can withstand the initial assault and the high damage and can live past the damage over time things from the poison, then the assassin has a problem because it can't take that many hits. Its hit points are lower, limited in armor, so if you like sneaking in behind and causing lots of damage real fast and running away, this is the guy for you. Rangers, of course, in terms of rogues, they have the heaviest armor ability. They can wear up to medium armor. They can use swords, maces, daggers, bows, of course, is their thing. They can dual wield. They cannot use a shield, however. I'm sorry, they can use a shield. They can, but they rarely do because you're going to do most of your damage with a bow with these guys. You have lots of benefits to use a bow with a ranger. Coming down here to the mages, necromancers. This is your typical raise undead and send the undead to fight for you. Now, unlike most games where you might have one skeleton that you can raise, I've played a lot of EverQuest, so you get one skeleton. These guys can raise more than one. They can raise up to, I think, 10 eventually, and I'll show you a necromancer in another video. That can really do your damage for you. Plus, you can life tap. You have other spells of pestilence you can cast at enemies. Very, very strong character class. Light armor, cloth or silk. They can use a dagger or a staff. They can use a crossbow. But you're not going to use your dagger very much other than to maybe stab things at the last second. You're going to use your undead minions to do most of your damage for you as long as your spells. But very, very strong, very, very powerful. Come down here, Stygians, so we can show the others. Let's talk about demonologists for a second. Demonologists, they really focus on dealing with demons from the underworld, which if you read any of the Robert Howard books, there's several stories dealing with creatures and demons from the underworld. These guys are really good at learning how to use these creatures to their advantage. They're closest probably to the actual high magic in terms of their spell casting. Their strengths are fire spells and lightning spells, primarily fire spells. So if you like burning things to a crisp, these are the folks for you. Okay, they can summon a pet. The pet is of limited ability until maybe later on. So you want to make sure your constitution bonuses are good on the armors that you get. But you know they can fry you very, very easily, both from a distance and far out. So these guys can really cause a lot of damage. And lastly is the Herald of Zotli. I have to admit I've only played the Herald of Zotli once. Wasn't for me. Think of a combination between a barbarian and a demonologist for the most part. They wear cloth armor, but they can wield a two-handed sword as well as a dagger or a crossbow. Most of these guys, they run around with swords and beat on things, and then they can cast magic during the middle of a fight as well. At the right time, they can shape shift. And this is a nice thing because when they shape shift, their armor class jumps up and allows them to be able to take a lot more damage while they're fighting and still cast magic. So that's kind of what you've got there.